Hey guys, tonight we're stepping barefoot onto a dusty road that winds through the hills of KwaZulu-Natal, South Africa. The sun is low, casting golden light over the thorn trees, and the air smells like dry grass and wood smoke. You pass a group of boys herding goats with shouts and whistles, and somewhere nearby someone is singing while hammering metal. You don't know it yet, but this quiet place is about to teach you a language most people have never heard, because it's spoken not with words, but with beads. This isn't your average stroll through a historical footnote. This is the beginning of a journey into the bead-coded universe of the Zulu people realm, where love letters are worn around your waist, war warnings can hang off your ear, and an entire conversation might be embedded in the way a triangle tilts on a beaded armband. You probably won't survive this as the same person who walked in. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in a village where the pace of time seems to have taken a nap. The cattle move slowly, the air buzzes with crickets. There's an old acacia tree at the centre of it all, gnarled like it's storing secrets. At the edge of the clearing, you spot a woman sitting on a low stool, her fingers darting between bowls of beads red, green, black, yellow. Her hands move quickly, but her face is still, watching. You greet her with a cautious smile and a respectful nod. She doesn't respond in words, but gestures for you to sit. She pushes a shallow basket your way. It's full of little glass beads, worn smooth from handling. You pick one up. It's white, and it looks plain until the light hits it just right. Then you see a faint shimmer, like it knows more than it lets on. You think it's just decoration? The woman says in Zulu, accented English, a dry smile curling across her face. You think we wore these for the missionaries? You chuckle politely, unsure how much of that was a joke. She leans forward, eyes gleaming. Everything here means something. Every colour, every shape, even where you place it. A few chickens wander nearby, and somewhere behind you, a child laughs. But all your focus is locked on the old woman's fingers now. They've begun stitching beads onto a thin strip of fabric blue, then white, then red. She doesn't use a pattern. The rhythm is all in her hands. You realise you're watching someone code a message. This is beadwork, yes, but not the Etsy shop kind. This is Zulu Bead-Coding, a centuries-old method of silent communication woven into necklaces, headdresses, belts, and bracelets. You're watching history, emotion, rebellion, and maybe a little gossip thread itself together, one bead at a time. Mainstream historians agree that Zulu beadwork evolved as a deeply symbolic form of expression, especially for women. Each colour carried a set of meanings, though sometimes contradictory. Red might mean anger passion. White could be spiritual purity, the mourning of someone lost, and there were rules, but they weren't written down. Instead, they were taught quietly, over years, by women like the one now guiding your hands toward your first handful of beads. She encourages you to try, and your first attempt is, well, let's call it abstract. Your fingers fumble the thread, and you accidentally launch a few beads into the dirt. She doesn't scold you, just laughs a soft, crinkly laugh, like dry leaves being stirred by wind. You are not useless, she says, which you hope is a compliment. She shows you again how to hold the needle like it's an extension of your breath, how to listen for tension in the thread, how to choose colours based on the feeling in your chest, not your eyes. It's hypnotic. Your breathing slows. The world narrows to just you, the beads, and the rustling trees above. Fringe historians argue that the origins of this colour language go back far beyond European contact, perhaps tied to older Bantu-speaking traditions. There are even theories that early Zulu patterns echoed the rhythms of oral poetry, certain triangles corresponding to drum beats or song refrains. But of course, beadwork doesn't record itself. It's always vulnerable to being misread, especially by outsiders. You glance at your finished strip. It's a little wonky, mostly white, with a few off-center green beads. "What does mine say?" you ask, half joking. The woman peers at it, lips twitching. "It says," she pauses, "that you are still learning, but your heart is open." Not a bad start, you think. As the sun dips below the trees and the shadows stretch long across the earth, she offers you a bowl of maize porridge and sits quietly while you eat. No rush, no lecture, just the weight of a new language settling in your hands. A language you've only just begun to understand, one bead at a time. You wake the next morning to the sound of gentle sweeping, someone brushing the packed earth outside your hut with a bundle of dried grass. The sun is already painting the sky with soft apricot hues, and the faint scent of wood smoke from breakfast fires drifts in through the thatch roof. It's early, but you're already itching to get back to the beads. Outside, the village is slowly stirring. A few women carry baskets on their heads. Children run past with reckless joy, dodging chickens and each other. And there, in the same spot as yesterday, sits the old woman, your teacher, barefoot, beads already spilling from her lap like tiny pieces of memory. She nods as you sit beside her again. This time, she doesn't hand you beads right away. Instead, she holds up a single colour, blue. "Do you remember this one?" she asks. You squint at it. "Peace?" She smiles. "Yes, but also sadness, and sometimes loyalty." You frown. How can one colour mean so many things? She leans back, her eyes narrowing as she looks toward the sky. Because people mean many things. You don't carry just one story. And just like that, your bead-coding vocabulary expands. White is purity, yes, but also mourning. Green is growth, but it can also whisper jealousy. Black isn't just sorrow, it can mean marriage, strength, or even the unknown. It's a messy, beautiful web of meanings, woven with care and contradiction. Historians still argue whether this complexity was accidental or intentional. Was the ambiguity designed to make outsiders misunderstand? Or was it simply a mirror of real life, where feelings don't always sit neatly in labelled boxes? You return to yesterday's bracelet and suddenly see it differently. That misplaced green bead, was it an error or a buried emotion? You start again, but now with intent. You choose red not because it's bold, but because you're curious what it will say in context. You line it with black and white, setting it against a border of soft yellow. Each time you add a colour, your teacher watches, not judging, just reading, like she's flipping through pages of your mood. "Tell me what this says," you ask when you finish. She nods slowly. "It says you are curious but cautious. You are thinking about love but not ready to ask for it." You blink. That feels surprisingly accurate. There's a pause. Then she hands you another, piece older, more delicate. It's a long strip of beadwork, mounted on soft leather. The colours shift in neat triangles and chevrons. White, green, blue, red. "This one belonged to a girl named Lindiwe," she says. "A long time ago." You run your fingers across the tiny glass beads, careful not to snag the fragile thread. "What does it mean?" The old woman smiles softly. "It meant, I love you, but my father does not approve." A tiny laugh escapes your throat. So she told her boyfriend that, with this? She nods. Every time she wore it, and he knew, and no one else had to. That's when it clicks for you. These beads weren't just decorative, they were text messages, subtweets, Letters slipped under the table. They were how Zulu girls and women said what they couldn't always say, allude especially, in a culture with strict expectations about courtship and gender roles. In the 1800s, when British missionaries began documenting native customs, they often dismissed beadwork as ornamental or superstitious, but some were clever enough to notice patterns. A few even tried to decode the language, though they often got it hilariously wrong. One clergyman, for example, insisted that a belt of red, white and black meant eternal sin, when it likely meant I miss you, but I'm still mad. Quirky side note, in one remote part of KwaZulu-Natal, there was a belief that certain patterns could influence weather. A particularly daring necklacier, zigzag of blue and white triangles, was rumoured to call rain during dry seasons. Whether it worked or not, well, historians still argue about that one. Your teacher leans in again. The colours speak, but the order that's the true sentence. You stare at your own messy bead strip. It's a jumble. But now you see it as a sentence, maybe a paragraph. Unpolished, yes, but meaningful. It's not unlike learning a new language and realizing the first thing you ever said was slightly embarrassing. Later, you join a group of younger girls sitting beneath the shade of a wild fig tree. They're beading fast, chatting in clicks and giggles. One girl leans toward you and whispers something. You don't catch it, but another translates with a grin. She says, "You bead like a goat with hiccups." You can't help laughing. Fair enough. But then she hands you her bracelet bright, joyful, with oranges and blues and a single bead out of place, white. You raise an eyebrow. What does this say? She shrugs. It says, I am happy, but also not really. Your heart twists. You think about all the times you've told someone, I'm fine, when you weren't. And suddenly, this bracelet says exactly what words couldn't. As the sun slides lower again and the air cools, the beading slows. The old woman gathers her tools and wraps them in cloth. Before leaving, she leans close, placing one last bead in your palm, clear, nearly invisible. What's this one? You whisper. She smiles faintly. That one is truth. You don't always see it right away. The next day, you walk barefoot to the bead circle early, determined to improve. Your hands still feel clumsy, but something about the rhythm has started to seep into your bones. There's a quiet calm that takes over when you're stringing beads, the kind that only comes from doing something slow, deliberate, and oddly emotional. Today, the old woman greets you with a different project. Not a bracelet this time, but a square about the size of your hand stitched onto stiff cloth. It's a sampler, she explains. A training tool. Every line of beads contains a new pattern. Some are neat zigzags. Others form jagged teeth, like little mountains. And one line looks suspiciously like a row of birds. These are for practice, she says. You need to learn shapes, not just colours, because shapes speak too. You trace a triangle made from red and white beads, nestled inside a field of black. That one, she says, that triangle means desire, or sometimes danger. Depends which way it points. You tilt your head. Pointing up, she says, tapping the pattern, means passion is rising, but if it points down, it means someone's in trouble. You blink. So, it's a flirt or a warning. She shrugs. Why not both? Here's the thing. Zulu beadwork isn't just about colours or aesthetics, it's full-blown semiotics. Every detail matters. Shape, direction, grouping, even spacing. Historians love to overanalyze whether these choices were always conscious. But let's be real, if a teenage girl can master 3 secret meanings in a necklace while avoiding her mother's questions, that's strategy, not accident. Fringe anthropologists have even tried to create entire grammatical systems from these patterns, like some kind of wearable Morse code. One went as far as building a bead syntax tree, complete with subject-object structure. The mainstream laughed. Still, you can't help but wonder, were these artisans quietly building a visual grammar, while Victorian scholars were busy classifying African cultures as primitive? You lean into the sampler, repeating the zigzag pattern slowly. Your hands still tremble slightly when threading the needle, but you're getting faster. You manage 3 rows before pricking your finger and yelping. The old woman doesn't scold you. She just hands you a scrap of cloth, nodding like you're passing some invisible threshold. Nearby, one of the village boys watches you with mild interest. Then he scoffs and says something under his breath. Your teacher chuckles. He says, "Why are you wasting time with girls' games?" You raise an eyebrow. "Girls' games?" She shrugs. "That's what they say. But ask him what these patterns mean. Ask him how to read his mother's wedding necklace. He won't know." You grin. "Sounds like someone's insecure." She barks out a laugh. "Exactly. The gendered nature of Zulu beadwork has always been part of its mystery. Traditionally, women made the pieces, but men wore them too. A man's headband could tell you who he was dating. His armband might declare a political allegiance, and his waistband might say, 'Well, more than you wanted to know.' Yet, ironically, many men remained illiterate in the very language they wore. There's a bit of poetic justice in that, don't you think?" Later, your teacher brings out a bundle of older piecesons with worn string, faded beads, frayed corners, museum-grade relics basically. She lays them on a cloth and points to each. "This one," she says, lifting a small strip of green and white diamonds, "was worn by a girl on the day she rejected a suitor." You blink. "Wait, just rejected him? With beads?" She nods. "He came wearing red and blue. She wore this. It meant, 'I see you, I decline.'" And suddenly, you're falling in love with the elegance of it all. No drama, no ghosting, just polite refusal via textile messaging. Another piece has jagged rows of black and yellow stark, eye-catching. "That one was for a bride," she says. "It says, 'I am nervous, but I'm ready.'" You look closer and realize the yellow beads are cracked, dulled from age and sunlight. You wonder if the bride ever found the piece she coded into her jewelry. Mainstream history tends to overlook emotional nuance in traditional art. It loves dates, conflicts, kings, but rarely does it pause to appreciate the quiet bravery of a girl telling the world she's scared to marry a man she barely knows. You keep beading. You finish your sampler square, lopsided but honest, and when you hold it up, your teacher takes it gently, runs her fingers over it and says, "Better." That night, you dream in colour. No words, just lines of blue, triangles of red, a single bead of translucent truth in the centre of everything. The morning is misty and soft, like someone gently draped a sheet over the world. You wrap a blanket around your shoulders and shuffle back to the beading circle. The old woman is already there, sitting cross-legged and stringing beads with the kind of patience that makes you question every rushed decision you've ever made. She motions for you to sit, then reaches into a cloth bundle and pulls out something different. A long necklace made of black, green, and white beads, woven tightly in a repeating zigzag pattern. "This," she says, "started a family feud." You blink. "Over a necklace?" She nods solemnly. The triangle was upside down. At first, it sounds absurd. But the more she explains, the more it makes sense. A girl barely 15 had been secretly seeing a boy from the neighbouring village. Her mother disapproved, of course. When the boy came calling, the girl gave him this necklace. Now, to the untrained eye, the design was symmetrical, pretty, decorative. But to someone fluent in bead code, the meaning was unmistakable. The downward-pointing triangles, usually, A warning were mixed with green, a colour of growth and fertility. The pattern didn't say, "I love you," it said, "I want you." The boy's family was thrilled. The girl's mother? Mortified. She took the necklace back, burned it, and beat the girl with a cooking spoon, the old woman mutters. But it was too late. The boy had already bragged. You wince? Historians still argue whether bead messaging was meant to be that personal. Some say it was communal shared symbols passed down like recipes. Others insist it was more like slang, changing, rebellious, full of private nuance that only certain people understood. Fringe collectors in the 20th century tried to catalogue the Zulu bead alphabet as if you could assign fixed meanings to every colour and shape. But like language itself, the truth was slipperier. What meant desire in one village could mean danger in another. Some pieces carried double meanings on purpose, especially when you didn't want your father or your priest or a nosy aunt to know your business. Your teacher chuckles. You think we didn't know how to keep secrets. She hands you a fresh strip of cloth and a small pile of beads in green, white, and black. Try again. Make the triangle face both ways. Say one thing on the left and the opposite on the right. You frown. Won't that be confusing? Life is confusing, she replies. Might as well wear it honestly. You try. Carefully, slowly, you lay out your pattern. One side rising triangles in green and black desire and strength. The other side falling triangles in white and green regret and growth. You're not even sure what it means yet, but it feels oddly personal, a little like telling two stories at once. A little like admitting you haven't figured it all out yet. That, she says when you're done, is much closer to the truth. Later, while the younger girls practice floral motifs, you sit beneath a fig tree and flip through an old photo album someone left on a bench. The photos are black and white, faded, some torn, women in traditional dress, men in hats, children holding hands, but what catches your eye is the jewellery. Even in monochrome, the beadwork sings. You find one photo of a girl, maybe 16, wearing a choker and arm cuffs. Her face is fierce, proud. You recognise the zigzag pattern, the same one you just learned. You wonder what she was trying to say. Was it love? Defiance? Maybe both? You ask your teacher about her. Thandi, she says. She made trouble. Good trouble. You raise an eyebrow. What kind of trouble? She once wore a necklace that told two boys she liked both of them and let them figure it out at the same dance. You laugh out loud. She didn't. Oh, she did, caused a whole scene. One of the boys cried. The other tried to fight a goat. You're wheezing now. She moved to Johannesburg later, got a factory job, kept beading on the weekends, sent bracelets home to her sisters with little coded gossip stitched in. You stare at the photo a little longer. That's when it really hits you. This wasn't just art or communication. It was power. In a time and place where young women weren't always allowed to speak freely, beadwork became a secret microphone, and no one could take it away. You could wear your heart, your anger, your hope, your warnings right out in public, and only the right eyes would understand. Mainstream scholars love to analyse resistance through speeches and uprisings, but they often miss the quieter forms. The girl who says no with a necklace, the sister who mourns in yellow and blue, the flirt who uses beads to test the limits of what's allowed. And you fumbling outsider that you are, you're starting to understand it one bead at a time. As the sun dips lower and the shadows stretch across the compound, the old woman gathers your latest piece and tucks it into her lap. Tomorrow, she says softly, we learn about the colours the missionaries feared most. You don't sleep easily that night, not because of worry, but because your dreams are now threaded with colours and codes, and your hands twitch with patterns even in the dark. The next morning, the air feels heavier. The breeze that usually dances through the grass is still. Even the goats are quiet. You sense a shift not just in the weather, but in the mood of your lessons. When you arrive at the beading circle, the old woman is already there, her back a little straighter, her basket of beads arranged more deliberately than usual. Today, she's not smiling. She holds up a single necklace. It's long, almost ceremonial, and its colours are immediately striking: black, red, green, white arranged in jagged, repeated bursts, like lightning captured in thread. These, she says, were the beads that made the missionaries nervous. You sit up straighter. Why? Because they couldn't read them. She places the necklace in your hands. It's heavier than you expect. The pattern looks chaotic, no soft symmetry, no dainty floral repeats. It's bold, jagged, and a little defiant. You trace a line of alternating red and black triangles. What does this say? She folds her arms. That depends who's reading. To us, it meant strength, bloodline, unity. But to them, it looked like rebellion. You imagine a Victorian missionary, starched collar and all, staring at this necklace and panicking quietly. You're not surprised. If you'd spent years trying to control a people, the last thing you'd want is a public display of words you couldn't understand, especially if they were strung around the necks of every young woman in the village. Historians still argue whether missionaries in colonial Natal truly understood the messaging in beadwork, or if they just sensed the danger of meaning they couldn't grasp. Some banned it altogether. Others tried to Christianize it, replacing traditional colours with white, only palettes, insisting on crosses or biblical symbols. But they couldn't erase the meaning, your teacher says. We just changed the code. She pulls out another piece of belt, made of white and green, with a single red bead placed dead centre. It's almost blank. Almost. That red bead, she says, meant revolution. You blink. Just one bead? She nods. Enough to get someone whipped, or worse. A chill runs through you. Suddenly, this gentle craft feels a lot more dangerous. In the 1870s and 1880s, Zulu resistance movements began to take shape in response to British encroachment. Most of these stories get told through battles and treaties, but some of the loudest warnings came in silent form songs, rituals, beadwork. When people couldn't write, they beaded. When they couldn't gather, they wore their messages on their sleeves. Literally, you ask. Were the men involved in the codes too? She pauses. Not usually. They wore them, but they didn't always know what they said. You smirk. So you could call a man a fool? In the necklace he was wearing? Her face cracks into a sly grin. Oh yes, many times. Fringe oral traditions even suggest that some Zulu women created entire mourning outfits laced with coded beads after male leaders surrendered too easily to colonial rule. A waistband of pure white, with a jagged black band down the middle, worn at funerals not just for the dead, but for the dignity they believed had died with the treaties. You glance down at the necklace in your lap again. It's no longer just pretty, it's political. Your teacher hands you a new strip of cloth and nods toward the beads. Now, make something they wouldn't understand. You hesitate. Like anything? Say something bold, but say it quietly. Oh? You sift through the beads, then begin stringing. Red, black, red, white. A slash of yellow. It's not a pattern anyone would recognize at first glance, but you know what it means. It's a whisper of defiance, stitched with intent. A sentence you don't have to say aloud. As you work, the old woman hums a tune under her breath. A war song? A lullaby? It could be either. That's the magic of this place. Meanings overlap, blur, change with context. One person's bracelet is another's resistance banner. After an hour, You hold up your strip. It's raw, uneven, but strong. She studies it for a moment, then says, "That is how we speak without raising our voices." Later, you walk through the village, your new piece tied around your wrist. A few women notice it. One gives you a knowing look. Another leans close and whispers, "Careful, that one says too much." But she smiles as she says it. Back at the hut, you stare at your reflection in a chipped piece of mirror, watching how the beads catch the light. You think about all the women before you, who walked boldly into silence and rewrote it one bead at a time. Tonight, as the fire crackles and the wind finally returns, you lie down under your woven blanket and think of those lone red beads, those hidden triangles, that single strip of leather that caused a feud. You think of how many revolutions were stitched before they were shouted, and you think, maybe that's why they feared it. The next morning greets you with a familiar rhythm, the gentle brush of a broom across dirt, the thump of a water jug against a woman's hip, the sharp chatter of children already chasing each other through the compound, but your mind is somewhere else still, tangled in yesterday's colours. You keep thinking about that single red bead, that quiet shout. By now, the beadwork table feels like home. You sit without being asked, already reaching for the cloth, the needle, the thread. Your hands know the movements, even if your meanings still wobble. The old woman doesn't say good morning. Instead, she holds up a tiny bracelet barely wide enough for a child's wrist. The colours are pale, soft yellow, muted blue, and white in small diamond clusters. You lean closer, thinking it looks too sweet to carry any drama. "This," she says, "was worn by a girl on her wedding day." You smile. "A happy one?" The old woman purses her lips. "She was 14. The man was 40. And your breath catches. "She cried while making it," she adds, voice flat. You study the beads again, suddenly seeing the blue not as calm but cold, the white not as purity but surrender, the yellow maybe fear. "You can code grief," she says softly, "in joy's colours." That one hits deep. Historians still argue whether traditional Zulu marriages were always arranged or if love matches were more common than early accounts admit. Some anthropologists, reading missionary journals from the 1800s, insist that affection played no part in village unions. But modern oral historians say otherwise, that plenty of young people fell in love, rebelled, and even ran away together. The problem was, their stories weren't the ones being recorded. You hold the wedding bracelet gently. What happened to her? The old woman shrugs. She died young, but her sister kept the bracelet, said it told the truth when no one else would. Oh, that quiet truth becomes a thread through your day. You start working on your own narrow cuff, but instead of bright contrasts, you choose soft colours, blue, white, and a thin line of yellow. It's strange how sombre they feel now, like a whisper of tired hope. One of the younger girls sits beside you, beading in near silence. She's maybe 10, with sharp eyes and fingers twice as fast as yours. She leans over and peers at your bracelet. "Is it about someone you miss?" she asks bluntly. You blink. Maybe. She nods like, "That makes perfect sense," then shows you Hersa swirl of red and orange with a chaotic black core. "Mine says I'm mad," she says, almost cheerfully. You laugh softly. "At who?" She shrugs. "Everyone." Fringe researchers often note that children in rural Zulu communities were taught bead colour theory before they could fully read or write. The colours were their first language of expression, especially in places where formal schooling was rare or discouraged. Some patterns like interlocking diamonds became symbolic phrases passed between siblings or cousins, signalling everything from secret crushes to shared grief. You watch as the girl fixes a crooked line in your bracelet. "That yellow should go here," she says, pointing. "It's brighter near the white." You nod, humbled. "Thank you, teacher." She beams. Later, the old woman takes out a longer strip, one not worn on the body, but meant to hang on a wall. It's what she calls a memory piece. "Made this when my mother died," she says. "Every line tells a day." You stare at it, rows and rows of colour, no symmetry, no repetition. It looks chaotic at first, but you begin to notice rhythms. 3 days of green, a sudden block of black, a single red bead tucked far off centre. "What happened there?" you ask. She touches the red bead gently. "That was the day I let myself be angry." You sit with that for a long while. Mainstream museums often classify beadwork as decorative textile arts, filed somewhere between basketry and embroidery. But very few take the time to translate the emotional terrain. No little plaques explain that a crooked bead might mean grief, or that an uneven border could be someone's trembling hand on the day they buried their mother. You ask if you can try your own memory piece. She hands you a fresh band of cloth and says, "Start with the day you left home." You think for a moment, then place a dark blue bead at the corner. You don't even know why. It just feels right. Then you add a white one, a space, a green. Slowly, you begin to map not events, but feelings, the ones no journal ever captured, the ones you didn't even realize you'd kept. The young girl peeks at your work again. "You're making something real now." You smile, this time without hesitation. That evening, the sky turns the same pink as the bead you dropped earlier, the one that rolled into the grass and vanished. Maybe it's still out there, buried near someone else's memory. Or maybe it's waiting to be found by someone who needs to start their own bracelet of truth. As the last light fades, you look down at your cloth strip. It's uneven, imperfect, but it's yours. It says more than you ever expected. You wake to rain. Not a storm just. That gentle, persistent drizzle that settles into the dust and makes everything smell alive. The ground is soft under your feet, and the trees drip like they're whispering old stories. You wrap your cloth around your shoulders and make your way to the beading circle, which today has moved under the wide thatched overhang beside the grain shed. The old woman is already there, legs folded, sorting beads in bowls the colours of earth and sky. She gestures for you to sit, then pulls out a bundle of dark cloth from her basket. "This," she says, "was smuggled." You pause, halfway into arranging your own beads. "Smuggled?" She nods. "Into the mission school. 1911. She spreads the cloth flat between you. It's faded and fraying at the edges, but the beadwork is clear. A thick band of alternating red and blue triangles, with a border of white and black chevrons. At first, it looks decorative bold, yes, but not exactly rebellious. Then she points. "This," she says, tapping the red triangle, "meant you are being watched." You swallow. "Who wore it?" "A girl, my aunt. She wasn't allowed to bead. They called it pagan, said it distracted from proper study. So she stitched this in secret, under her apron, showed it only to friends." A pause. "One friend told the headmistress." You wait, heart sinking. She was made to burn all her beadwork, every piece, then scrub the church floor with a toothbrush. Ah. You sit in stunned silence for a moment, fingers brushing the edges of the forbidden cloth. Historians still argue whether early mission schools deliberately erased indigenous culture or simply misunderstood it. Some say the bans on beadwork, singing, and ritual were misguided attempts at discipline. Others are blunter. It was cultural silencing, plain and simple. Fringe archivists have uncovered letters between Zulu students from that era written in a mix of English and code, referring to bracelet days and rainy belts. Some even speculate that students passed messages to each other by swapping beaded hairpins sewn with specific sequences. No one ever found a master code. That was the point. Your teacher shakes her head. They tried to strip us, but we just changed where we wore our truth. She hands you a needle and thread, then gestures to the old smuggled cloth. Mend it. You hesitate. I don't want to mess it up. It's already damaged, she says gently, but it can still carry new meaning. So you begin. You select beads carefully white for clarity, blue for silence, a single black one in the corner, like a closing eye. You stitch slowly, trembling a little, not from fear, but from responsibility. When you finish, the old woman nods, satisfied. Now it remembers more. She sets it aside and reaches into another pouch, this one newer, brighter, and unmistakably worn on the outside. It's a dance sash, long, narrow, and heavy with bright red, green, and yellow beads in sweeping curves. This was for a girls' competition, she says. They danced barefoot under the moon, but this one didn't just dance. She announced her choice. You raise an eyebrow. Of what? Of him, she says, pointing to a sharp angle in the pattern. That red curve meant, I choose you, but you better be brave. You laugh softly. Wow! She wore it in front of everyone. No hiding. You picture it now bare feet slapping the earth, bead sash swinging in rhythm, moonlight bouncing off colour-coded declarations of affection. How many teenage hearts must have pounded that night? Mainstream accounts of Zulu courtship often reduce it to rigid customs and cattle dowries, but that ignores the creativity and mischief that pulsed through every bead and dance. Yes, negotiations happened between families, but love slipped through the gaps like music, and beadwork was its favourite disguise. The younger girls crowd around now, giggling as they show off their own dance sashes, most of them still unfinished. One has a zigzag of green and orange that she claims spells out a new boy's name. Another is trying to bead her entire birthday into a waistband, which you silently admire while also questioning the feasibility of such ambition. You ask, do they still wear these to dances? The old woman nods. Some, but now it's mostly for festivals or weddings. You watch the girls work, laughter bouncing between them, like beads in a bowl. Even now, with TikTok and school exams and the occasional smartphone sneaking into the mix, the bead language lives, adapted, resilient. Later that afternoon, while the rain clears and the scent of wet soil lingers, you work on your own dance sash. It's not perfect, and you're not dancing for anyone, but something about it feels right. You add a narrow band of purple, just to see how it feels. The old woman peers over. Royalty, she says. You blink. Seriously? Sometimes. Or longing. Or dreams. You decide to keep it. As the sun returns, glinting through the trees, your dance sash begins to shine. Not loudly, but quietly, like a thought too delicate to speak aloud. You wonder who might read it one day. Or maybe no one will. Maybe that's okay. Maybe the act of making it is the message. The air is drier, today clean, and sharp, like someone peeled the clouds away and left only sun. The dust stirs softly under your sandals as you return to the beading circle, where the old woman is already hunched over something that looks different. Not cloth, not thread. Paper. More precisely, old, brittle paper taped into a scrapbook with bits of glue and care. Clippings, photos, magazine scancel, aging with the same sepia patience. She doesn't look up as you sit. You've learned the code, she says, but now you'll see who tried to break it. She turns the book to face you. The first image hits like a splash of cold water. A British officer, circa 1880, stiff in his uniform, holding up a beaded necklace like it's some sort of snake. You read the caption beneath Ithis, notes attempting to translate the colours into moral meanings. Red equals sin, black equals evil, green equals hope. You snort. He got that wrong. Oh, terribly, the old woman says dryly. He thought a courtship belt was a warning against adultery. You flip to the next page. A stern-looking missionary's diary page, handwritten and scrawled with Bible verses next to sketches of bead patterns. His notes say, most likely pagan, recommend confiscation. You trace the ink with your finger. Did they ever ask the women what it meant? She raises one eyebrow. Ask? Right. Silly question. Mainstream colonial history is full of this pattern outsiders documenting, classifying, defining without ever listening. Beadwork was labelled primitive art or feminine ornament, stripped of its context and complexity. Worse still, it was sometimes displayed in museums with no explanation, like a colourful fossil without its fossil record. But here, in the scrapbook, you see another thread, resistance. One photo shows a group of Zulu women at a market in 1922. They're laughing, clearly posing for the camera butt. Every one of them wears beadwork that doesn't match the approved Christian modesty styles. There's fire in their pattern choices, defiance in their necklaces. One girl even has a bracelet spelling out, according to a later footnote, he thinks he knows me, he does not. You grin. They kept beading, the old woman says. Even when it was banned, mocked, misunderstood, they just changed how they wore it. Oh. She flips to a page showing a white lace veil embroidered with beadwork on the inside, hidden from plain sight but pressed directly against the skin. That one was worn to a missionary wedding, she says. They told her no beads, so she sewed them where no one could see. You're quiet for a long moment. Historians still argue whether Zulu women were consciously subverting colonial control through beadwork or simply preserving tradition in the only way they could. But when you see the look in these women's eyes, when you read their coded rebellion stitched beneath the lacettes, hard not to call it what it is, clever, quiet, utterly brilliant resistance. You flip to the back of the scrapbook. One last clipping catches your eye. A 1,957 magazine spread titled Zulu Beadwork, Africa's Glittering Mystery, featuring a white woman modelling a necklace that to your trained eye is completely nonsensical. The caption reads, Authentic tribal marriage collar, likely symbolising harmony and fertility. The old woman sighs. That's from when they started selling our meanings. You glance up. In the 50s, she explains, traders began collecting beadwork from villages, selling it to tourists or export shops, but they didn't know the codes, so they just made them up. Pretty patterns. No Sewell. She pulls out a small bundle, wrapped in faded newspaper. Inside is a necklace that looks like the one in the photo, same shape, same colours, but this one's older, clearly worn with intent. This is the real one, she says. It meant, I mourn what you destroyed. You stare at it, suddenly overwhelmed. Quirky historical side note. In the 1970s, a Johannesburg fashion house tried to trademark a series of bead designs for their runway show. They even named them after English emotions hope, jealousy, elegance. But when the designs hit the magazines, rural beadmakers wrote angry letters. Some even mailed back the patterns with corrections. One letter read simply, "This says nothing." You think about that. How easy it is to copy shape but lose spirit, to wear a pattern without knowing what it meant to the hands that stitched it. You reach into your own bead pouch and pull out the strip you've been working on for days. It's crooked in places, with mismatched edges, and one red triangle refuses to sit flat. You hand it to the old woman. She doesn't say anything for a long time, just studies it. Her fingers move slowly over the beads, then she looks up and says, "This one tells the truth. It's messy, but it tells." You exhale, like something inside your chest finally released. She gestures for you to place it in the scrapbook. You pose. "Mine? You've earned your line in the story." "Oh?" So you glue it in crooked edge, and all next to the women who danced, stitched, whispered, and resisted with every bead they wore. As the sun dips low, and the sky shifts to lavender, you sit back, staring at the page. Your piece doesn't sparkle. It doesn't match the others. But it carries a message now, and you finally know how to read it. The wind is playful this morning, tugging at skirts, flipping leaves, and scattering a few rebellious beads across the swept dirt. You and the others chase after them, laughing as if it's a game, though each bead feels strangely precious now, like a word caught mid-sentence. By the time you settle back into the beading circle, your fingers are already twitching. Today, the old woman has something different in mind. She opens a narrow wooden box lined with felt and filled with beadwork, unlike any you've seen. "Love stories," she says simply. Inside the box are thin, flat beltsome, long, some short. Every one is covered in rows of carefully chosen colours and symmetrical patterns. But they're not just decorative, they're letters. And once you know how to read them, it's like cracking open a diary someone wore around their waist. "These were worn to the market," she explains, "or to the river, or under dresses, where only the right boy would see." She hands you one in soft red and white with a delicate border of sky blue. This one says, "I think of you when it rains." You smile. That's poetic. "Of course," she says, a little smug. "We invented romantic texting before you even had electricity." Historians agree that the so-called love letter belts were a widespread phenomenon in 19th and early 20th century Zulu courtship. Girls would create personalized, beaded messages coded, emotional, often cheeky, and give them to boys they admired. The belts might say, "I'm interested," "I'm waiting," or "You made me angry, but I'll forgive you if you dance well." The boy, in turn, was expected to respond with a bracelet, a matching belt, or a visit to her parents if things got serious. Of course, not everyone followed the rules. Fringe stories include accounts of boys who tried to decode multiple belts at once, hoping to impress several girls only to be caught wearing the wrong one to the wrong dance. Your teacher cackles at that. "One boy," she says, "came to a wedding wearing 2 belts. One said, 'I miss you,' and the other said, 'You lied to me.' He didn't realize he got slapped twice." You imagine the scene. Dusty feet stomping in rhythm, music rising, colours flashing, and then Boumon tragic bead illiterate Romeo discovering that patterns do have consequences. You ask, "Did you ever send a love belt?" She nods, slowly, then pulls out a small piece from her sleeve, worn soft with age. It's barely wider than a ribbon, in green and purple stripes, with a single orange bead at the end. "What did it say?" you ask. She hesitates. "It said, 'I trust you, don't ruin it.'" "Oh, did he?" A pause. Then a shrug. "Most do. You don't push." Instead, she hands you a blank band of cloth. Your turn. You freeze. "I don't even know what I'd say." "You don't have to know. Just start with a colour." You stare at the beads. Blue feels too sad. Red too loud. You settle on yellow soft, careful. Then green. A single black triangle, a white stripe like a breath between phrases. Slowly, your thoughts unravel into pattern. Not a love letter, exactly. More like a note to someone you haven't met yet. Now say it aloud, she instructs. You glance down, reading your own silent confession. It says, I've been quiet, but I see you. She nods. That's a good beginning. As the day rolls on, the younger girls get bolder with their belts. One writes, You are not as funny as you think. Another spells out, I'm still mad you didn't dance with me last month. And one little rebel simply beads no in capital zigzags across an entire sash. You applaud that one. Mainstream history rarely gives these belts the weight they deserve. They're treated as curiosities, quaint relics of rural flirtation. But to you now, they're layered, sophisticated, emotional artifactical parts, poem and protest. Later, one of the girls tugs your arm and whispers something in Zulu. Your teacher translates, She wants to know if you're making your belt for someone. You hesitate. I don't think so. The girl considers this, then nods. Sometimes we make them for ourselves. That idea stays with you. When the sun begins to fall, painting the sky with warm gold, you tie your almost finished belt around your waist. No one else may know what it says, but you do. And that's enough. You feel taller. As you walk back to your hut, beads swaying gently with every step, you can't help but wonder how many unspoken truths are stitched into the clothing of the people around you. How many quiet heartbreaks and private joys hang from someone's wrist or hide in their hairline. You remember the girl from the photo album, the one who danced under the moonlight with a sash that said, I choose you. You wonder what happened after that. Did he run? Did he stay? Or maybe, like you, she simply needed to speak out loud in a language only some would understand. The beading circle is quieter today, not somber, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm you didn't notice was happening until it passed. Even the wind is calm, swirling gently without urgency. You sit without a word. Your teacher is already threading beads. Today, she says, it's time for a story. Not her story, someone else's. She pulls out a wrapped bundle and opens it slowly, reverently, like a book you're not sure you're ready to read. Inside is a flat panel of beadwork about the size of a small placemat. Its bold black triangles, outlined in yellow, with a blue band slashing diagonally across the centre. This, she says, predicted exile. You pause. What do you mean? She doesn't answer immediately, just runs her fingers across the beads like she's brushing dust from memory. It was made by a cousin of mine, she says, long ago, before the prince was sent away. You lean in, she explains. There was a Zulu prince charismatic, well-loved, who began speaking too loudly about land and tradition during colonial negotiations. His words stirred people. His presence unsettled officials. So they found a reason to accuse him of inciting rebellion and sent him away. Before he left, his sister, your teacher's cousin, stitched this piece and hung it in her window. She didn't say a word, but those who understood, understood. The blue band meant distance, your teacher explains. The yellow around the black, it meant hope wrapped around danger. And the black triangles, you ask? War, or the threat of it, or the memory of it. Historians still argue whether beadwork ever played a direct political role in these momensa if we're projecting too much meaning onto symbols born of feeling. But you're sitting with someone who was there. And sometimes, lived memory is the loudest source of truth. They made her take it down, she says, called it incitement. She just laughed. What happened to her? She kept beading. The panel in your lap is stiff from age. The colours are still vibrant. You wonder how many people saw it hanging in that window and knew instinctively that something was wrong. How many passed by and said nothing but remembered. She didn't predict the exile, your teacher says at last. She just refused to pretend it was a surprise. You sit in silence for a moment, letting the weight of that settle. Then she hands you a new strip of cloth and says, "Make something that sees what's coming." You blink. "But I don't know what's coming." She tilts her head. Neither did she. So you try. You start with green new growth, beginnings. Then a jagged row of red triangles, tension. A soft line of white. You don't know why, but it feels like breath between moments. Finally, a single black square in the center. "What does it say?" the younger girl asks, watching you work. You shrug. "It says I feel something shifting, but I'm not sure what." She nods. That's real. Fringe interpretations of modern beadwork often try to assign political meaning to everything, declaring every zigzag an act of protest. But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe it's not about whether the beads are political. Maybe it's about whether they're honest. And honesty, in a world that demands silence, is always a little dangerous. You finish your piece and hold it up. It's not beautiful. It's not symmetrical. But it feels true. Your teacher nods. "Now hang it somewhere. Someone will see it," she says, even if they don't ask. Later, you help the others string their own warning pieces. One girl makes a tiny strip that says, "You forgot my birthday." Another makes one that simply says, "I see what you're doing." No context. No explanation. Just presence. The idea catches on. By late afternoon, strips of coded cloth hang from windows and doorknobs all around the village. One dangles from a tree branch. Another flutters from the back of a bicycle. No one explains them. No one needs to. You walk past them, reading what you can, guessing what you can't. A red, black, yellow loop makes your stomach drop. A row of pale blue beads strung into a question mark of colour makes you pause. It's not loud, but it's not quiet either. That night, you lie beneath your blanket and think about the cousin who refused to stay silent. You imagine her fingers quick and precise, stitching hope into cloth, even as the world tried to unthread it. You wonder if anyone told her what it meant to them. Maybe not. Maybe she never knew. Maybe she didn't need to. The day begins with blue skies, and the crackle of something frying in oil not a bad omen by any means. The bead circle is dappled with sunlight, and a few chickens have decided that today is their day to hover near the edges, hoping for dropped snacks. You arrive, expecting more stories, more beads, more slowly unwinding truths, but today the energy is different. The old woman waves you over, then points to a small basket in the centre of the circle. Inside are colours you haven't used yet, yellows and blues. Lots of them. "This," she says softly, "is for grief." You hesitate. "But blue means peace, right?" She nods. "Peace and sadness and longing all at once. And yellow? Memory and absence." She reaches into the basket and begins threading beads onto black string, her hands working slower than usual. "I lost my sister in winter," she says after a moment. "We were not allowed to cry in public, so I made a belt." You wait. She wore yellow in her eyes. Always laughing, always loud. I made her belt in quiet blue, because after she left, there was no laughter. You don't say anything, you just listen. Mainstream cultural guides often reduce Zulu bead colours to neat categories: blue equals fidelity, yellow equals wealth, but real stories are never so neat. Here, grief isn't always black. Sometimes it's light. Sometimes it hides inside brightness. Sometimes you mourn with the softest colours because you're too tired for drama. She shows you the belt. It's simple, mostly blue, broken only by a faded yellow diamond near the centre. "That's where I stopped," she says. "Couldn't finish." You run your fingers over the threadbare edges. It's the most delicate thing you've held in weeks, and somehow the most alive. Historians still debate how much of this bead-coded grief was communal and how much was personal. In some villages, mourners wore specific patterns for specific relatives. In others, women made grief strips privately and hid them under clothing. One fringe account tells of a girl who stitched her brother's name into the hem of her skirt with beads so small you'd need a magnifying glass to read them. You decide to try. You ask to make a grief pisano, because you know what you're mourning exactly, but because something in you feels heavy. Maybe it's someone. Maybe it's a version of yourself you left behind. Your fingers reach for blue, then yellow, then white. You don't overthink it. You just let your hands move, quiet and focused. The others around the circle do the same. No one talks. You can hear the wind move through the trees, the faint scuff of chickens, the occasional snort from a passing goat. But mostly it's beads clicking, grief clicking. Words that can't be spoken finding shape in colour. Eventually, the little girl who teased you earlier leans over and shows you her piece. It's a jagged loop of yellow and orange, cut through with a slash of black. What does it say? You ask. She shrugs. I don't know yet. Maybe I'll know later. You nod. That feels true. Some grief takes years to name. When the old woman sees your finished strip, she takes it gently in her hands, then, without asking, ties it around your upper arm. You don't have to explain, she says. You just have to carry it. You wear it for the rest of the day. No one asks, but a few women nod when they see it, as if to say, yes, we see it too. Later, the sun starts to slip behind the hills, and the sky turns soft and watercolour blue. You walk out toward the riverbank alone, the grief band still on your arm. The water moves slowly, like it's carrying secrets. You sit and watch the ripples, and wonder how many women sat here before you, stitching sadness into bracelets, hoping that someone in one might feel what they felt, just by brushing against a pattern. You reach into your pouch and pull out a single blue bead, then drop it into the river. It sinks, spinning as it goes. Maybe it will wash up miles from here. Maybe someone will find it and understand. Maybe they won't. But at least it spoke. You wake to the hum of excitement. It's not a loud buzz, but it's there in the way people move a little faster, in the whispered giggles of the younger girls, in the extra care the old woman takes when folding her skirt. Something's different today. You step into the circle and find it transformed. The usual cloths and bowls are gone. In their place stands a small table, draped in a clean woven cloth. On it, 5 bead belts, a single wooden comb, and a worn-out make-up mirror. The old woman catches your eye and smiles. Today, she says, you make a message for the living. You blink. Haven't we been doing that already? She shakes her head. Number, so far, you've made messages for memory, for love, for loss. Now, you must make one for someone who hasn't asked for it. That throws you, she explains. In some Zulu traditions, beaded gifts were not always invitations. They were sometimes proclamations. Not flirty, not passive, not waiting for permission. Just, here is how I feel. Here is what I need. Here is who I am. Deal with it. These were sometimes called izinkwadi zenkhulumo speech letters. Who would I make one for, you ask? She gestures toward the village. Anyone. The girl who speaks too little. The uncle who doesn't look you in the eye. Yourself. You laugh softly. Myself? She shrugs. Sometimes we need to say things to ourselves too. Historians still debate whether these speech letter belts were common or rare. Some say they were regional appearing, mostly near markets or in trade hubs. Others argue they were everywhere, simply invisible to those who didn't know how to see. After all, how do you catalogue something that was never meant to be explained? You pick up a strip of cloth. The girls watch you, curious. Even the goats seem quieter than usual. You begin with red. You don't know why, but it feels right. Then you add black, white, 2 yellow beads at the edge. It starts to feel like a question you haven't yet answered. When you pause, unsure, your teacher leans over. Don't try to make it pretty, just make it honest. You nod. You add a single green triangle, then stop. The old woman takes a look and smiles. It says, "I'm more than what I show." You blink. That's almost exactly what I was thinking. She points to your heart. The beads already know. Later, everyone around the circle is busy stitching. You peek at their work. One girl's belt reads, "I will not be quiet today." Another spells out, "You look at me, but you don't see me." And one small boy, maybe 6, proudly announces his reads, "I am the fastest runner, and nobody noticed." You grin. That's a speech letter if you've ever seen one. You ask the old woman if she's ever made one for someone who didn't like what it said. She gives you a look. All the best ones upset someone. And one time, she says, she made a belt for a visiting aunt who constantly commented on her unmarried status. The belt looked like a floral pattern to most, but the placement of the flowers spelled out, "Your silence would be the best blessing." The aunt never wore it. But she never asked about marriage again either. Fringe collectors sometimes mislabel these assertive pieces as miscommunications. One even described a speech letter as a poorly translated design lacking symmetry. But now, with thread in your hands, you realize symmetry wasn't always the point. Some truths are jagged. Some declarations deserve to be a little messy. You finish your speech letter and tie it around your wrist. You're not sure who it's for yet. Maybe it's for someone you haven't met. Maybe it's for the part of you that still whispers instead of shouting. But it's out now, worn, visible, and that's the difference. Later in the day, there's a small gathering by the fig tree. People bring food, sing quietly, and the girls show off their belts. A few boys pretend not to look, then sneak glances anyway. One woman laughs so hard at a bead message that she nearly drops her plate of maize cakes. The village elder, a stoic man, who usually doesn't linger, leans down to examine your wrist. "What does it say?" he asks. You look him in the eye. "It says I'm still becoming." He nods slowly. "A good message. You should keep wearing it." You do. That night, you hang it by your bedside. Let it sway gently in the breeze. Let it speak, even while you sleep. Because some messages don't need a reader. They just need to be said. The next day, your hands ache. Not in a painful way, but that deep, satisfying soreness that comes from making something over and over until your muscles finally remember how to move without thinking. Beading, it turns out, leaves its own kind of fingerprint in your body, a quiet rhythm in your fingertips, a weightless tension in your shoulders, a pulse of meaning that hums long after the last stitch. You arrive at the circle, expecting another lesson, but instead you're met with a grin. "You're done with lessons," the old woman says. "Now you're needed." You blink. Needed for what? She gestures toward the younger girls, huddled around a woven mat, tangled in a mess of thread, beads, and an obvious disagreement. You can hear it even from here. She says, "Yellow goes before green," one of them argues loudly. No, green is always after red," another insists. The old woman chuckles. "Go settle it." You hesitate. "I don't think I'm ready." She waves a hand. "None of us were. You'll learn by helping." You take a breath and step into the group. At first, they eye you skeptically. You're not the old one. You're not their grandmother. But when you kneel beside them and gently untangle the snarled thread without saying a word, they soften. "Let's see," you say, holding the unfinished band. "What are you trying to say?" They explain. It's meant to be a group braceletone they'll wear during an upcoming dance. Each girl wants her mood in it. One says joy, another nervous, a third ready to fall in love. No wonder it's a tangle. You suggest compromise, yellow for joy, but woven in green for hope, a thin line of blue for steadiness, even if nerves still flutter underneath, and the falling in love section? Well, maybe that's the single red diamond in the centre. They agree eventually, and by the time it's stitched, the argument is forgotten. The band hums with bright contradictions, and everyone's voice feels seen. Historians rarely document these collaborative pieces. They're hard to categorize. Most are made quickly, worn once, and then taken apart for parts. But in these little flashpoints of cooperation, you start to see something larger how beadwork builds not just identity, but community. How tiny glass fragments can hold a group of girls together better than any sermon or rulebook. The old woman watches from a distance, satisfied. "Now they'll fight less," she mutters, "for at least 5 minutes." Later that afternoon, she invites you into her hut. It's the first time. Inside, it's dim and warm, and filled with scent. Wood smoke, lavender, a hint of goat. The walls are lined with hanging strips of beadwork, hundreds of them, some only a few inches long, some stretching from ceiling to floor. Each one, she says, is a record. Of what? Moments? She replies. She shows you one made entirely of green. My planting season in 74. The soil was stubborn, but the rain came anyway. Another black and white triangles woven in tight sequence. The week the cows escaped, we laughed for days. And another blue, blue, blue. The morning after my brother died, I didn't speak, I just beaded. You step back and realize you're surrounded by a museum of one life. Not labelled, not catalogued, but vividly remembered. Fringe ethnographers have long speculated whether certain elders in Zulu communities created bead diaries, long cumulative pieces, not meant to be worn but stored, like written journals. But most researchers never got close enough to see them, and few women volunteered the information. Some things, after all, are not meant for museums. She hands you an empty cloth strip. Start yours. You fumble. Now? Yes, you have enough to record. And a fay. You sit by the firelight and begin to bead, row by row, your first market day. The red bracelet that made you cry. The little girl who fixed your yellow. The river where you dropped a single blue bead and whispered nothing. You bead all of it, not for anyone else, not to be read, just to be remembered. The old woman hums as you work. Some people write poems, she says. Some shout, some stitch. All of them are trying to stay alive in the memory of others. You glance at her wall. Has anyone read your whole life? She shakes her head. Number. But someone will, someday. You continue your strip, late into the evening, the firelight catching the beads like stars. The longer it grows, the quieter your mind becomes. There is peace in making something that asks nothing of you, just presence. By the time you sleep, your diary is only 12 rows long, but somehow it already feels like enough. The next day begins with a question. Not one you ask aloud, but one that follows you as you stretch your legs, sip warm maize tea, and walk slowly back to the circle. What do you leave behind when you leave? It clings to you, that question, like the lingering scent of wood smoke in your clothes or the dust on your ankles after a long walk. You're not ready to gnot yet, but the thought of leaving is suddenly real, and the old woman knows it. She doesn't mention it. She just gestures for you to sit. Today, the beads are already arranged in pairs, sets of 2, each with a matching twin. You tilt your head, curious. Today, she says, we talk about goodbyes. You pause. Are they always sad? Sometimes. But not always, she says. Sometimes they're necessary. Sometimes they're protective. She holds up a small bracelet longer than your thumb. It's green and white, tied with a fraying knot. This was given to a girl by her cousin before she married a man in another village. They wore matching ones for weeks before she left, to remember each other. And then what? She took hers, and her cousin kept this one. When they saw each other again, they compared them. If they still matched, they were still the same. That hits you hard. Historians still argue whether parting beadwork was a formal tradition or just an informal custom. Some records describe Zulu women exchanging tokens before long travels, especially during migration, marriage, or war. Others claim the meaning was personal, not ritual, but the artifacts exist, worn, frayed, stitched with longing and the hope of return. You ask if people ever sent pieces by messenger. She nods. Sometimes. But if you had to send it, it already said too much. You spend the morning making your own twin bracelet. It's difficult, not technically, but emotionally. You're trying to capture something about now, about here, about what this place has done to your hands, your head, your heart. You start with blue, so much blue, for the quiet, for the patience, for the way your breath has slowed since you first arrived. Then green, for the beginning you didn't know was happening, and a small dash of purple. Dreaming? The old woman asks. You nod. Maybe. When you finish, you make its twin. You lay them side by side, one for you, one for someone else. You don't know who yet, but someone. The younger girls begin doing the same. One ties her twin bracelets around the ankles of a goat and declares it her best friend. Another gives hers to the old woman, who accepts it with exaggerated seriousness and a wink. The air is warm, full of laughter, but your chest still feels heavy. The old woman sees this. She pulls you aside into the shade of a tree whose roots rise like ribs from the soil. When you leave, she says, don't stop beading. Oh, you laugh. I don't think I could, even if I tried. She nods. Good, because you don't need us to keep doing this. The stories aren't in this place. They're in your fingers now. She gives you something, a pouch, soft and faded. Inside are beads in strange colours, not the ones used here, metallics, greys, deep indigo, a few clear ones that catch the light in strange ways. These, she says, are from my mother's trade belt. She swapped with a traveller who passed through. German? Maybe Portuguese. She never knew. Why give them to me? She shrugs. Because you'll use them. I didn't. You feel your throat tighten. No ceremony, no speeches, just a quiet transfer of meaning. That evening, you begin beading with the strange beads. You mix them with yours foreign meeting familiar. The pattern makes no sense, and you love it. You stitch not to declare, not to grieve, not even to remember, but to invent. Historians rarely talk about invention in indigenous traditions. There's a tendency to fossilize to preserve, as if time stands still. But you've seen girls remix their aunt's old patterns with emojis. You've watched a boy bead lol into his sandal strap. You've seen the living language evolve, sparkle, argue with itself. It's not static. It never was. You bead until your eyes are tired, your neck stiff, and when you're done, you hold up your new strip. There's no name for it yet, no known translation, but it feels like a doorway. That night, as you lie beneath your blanket, your twin bracelets beside you, You whisper quietly into the dark. I will remember. I will return, even if only through colour. The day starts with music. Not the drumming kind, not yet, but the soft, syncopated clicking of beads being sorted, touched, and threaded in rhythm by 20 hands at once. It sounds like rainfall, or perhaps applause from very tiny fingers. You sit in the middle of it all now, not as a guest, not as a student, but something closer to part of the circle. Your cloth is folded the same way. Your beads rest in a bowl you shaped yourself from gourd shell. You reach for your thread without asking permission. Today, the old woman doesn't speak first. One of the girls does. She stands, clutching a wide, beaded collar-heavy with red and black chevron sand, clears her throat. I made this, she says, voice barely above a whisper, because I wanted someone to ask me how I was. The group is silent. Then someone claps just once. Then another. Then the old woman smiles and says, "That's what the collar is for." This sets off a ripple. One by one, others begin holding up their work. I made this because I was scared. I made this because I miss my father. I made this because I am angry and don't know at what. You hold your new invention, your strip of strange beads, unfamiliar colours, and realise it's your turn. I made this, you begin slowly, because I didn't know what to say, so I started without knowing. The nods around the circle are warm, understanding, a little amused. You finally get it, says the old woman. Mainstream records of Zulu beadwork rarely mention group exhibitions. Most references are individual. Belts, armbands, love letters. But in some regions, especially in transitional times villages, would host umhangano, small gatherings where bead makers would present not just beauty, but emotion, honesty even. Beads don't lie, the old woman says, tapping her chest. We do, but the colours betray us. Oh. She invites you all to prepare for a final display knot for tourists, not for elders, but for each other. You'll wear them tomorrow, she says, the ones that speak loudest. This idea lodges in your chest like a warm stone. You've worn beadwork as message, as memory, as mirror, but now you'll wear it as voice. The rest of the day is a flurry of choosing. Which piece is the one? The one that tells your truth best? One girl debates between two bracelets, one angry, one hopeful. She ends up braiding them together. Another stitches a last-minute cuff that says only, "I'm sorry I didn't say more." And you? You pick the one made with the gifted trade beads. It doesn't say anything specific, but it feels like everything. You polish it, tie it gently, rehearse the way it sits on your wrist. You imagine someone seeing it and asking, "What does that mean?" And you, for once, replying, "I'm still figuring it out." Because sometimes that's the bravest sentence. Fringe cultural theorists argue that beadwork, at its best, doesn't translate. It resists. It distills emotion into something beyond words. You're starting to see what they mean. When you wear your piece, it doesn't just say something, it is something. A presence, a posture. That night, the village hums with quiet preparation. You see women brushing clay onto their legs, braiding beads into their hair. Even the old men pretend not to notice, but they're watching too. Back in your hut, by firelight, you find yourself sorting your beads once more, not to make anything new, but to touch them, remember them, thank them. Blue, green, red, yellow, the purple that still feels like possibility. The translucent bead, the old woman called truth, the chipped one that never quite fit but insisted on being included. You lay them out beside you, a little rainbow of everything you've learned, feared, hoped, hidden. Then you whisper good night to them, just in case. Tomorrow, you'll wear them all. not around your neck, but on your skin, and whether someone reads theme or not, you'll know what they say. You rise before the sun, not because anyone told you to, but because something inside your chest feels like it's already awake. The village is still, except for the occasional rustle of wind through thatch, and your breath fogs slightly in the cool air. Today is the bead show, but no one calls it that. There's no flyer, no official name, no seating chart. It's just a day when people wear the things they've made and let them speak, while others try to listen. You dress slowly, not out of vanity, but reverence. You smooth the cloth over your shoulders, fasten the old woman's gifted beads to your wrist, and tie your thread-worn belt around your waist. Every piece hums like a quiet drumbeat against your skin. By the time you reach the clearing, the sun is brushing the tops of the acacia trees, painting everything gold. The circle is already forming. Women, girls, a few boys. Even some of the old men have wandered closer, pretending to be interested in the goats, while very obviously watching the beadwork parade begin. You join the line with your heart thudding. One by one, people step into the centre. No speeches, just presence. Each person steps forward, turns once, maybe twice, then steps back. But the silence isn't empty, it's listening. A girl in red and black steps forward. Her belt is jagged, uneven, full of knots. You can't read it, but you feel it. A boy follows swearing a tiny strip looped through his sandal strap. No one knows what it means, but it makes his grandmother cry. Your turn comes faster than expected. You walk into the clearing, feet bare on warm earth, sun rising behind you. You don't smile, you don't fidget, you just exist. Your beads catch the light. The strange foreign colours from the old woman's pouch shimmer beside your usual palette. The pattern isn't obvious, there's no punchline, but it holds everything. Your beginning, your questions, your almost goodbyes. Someone whispers, "What does it say?" Someone else replies, "It doesn't need to say anything. It is her." You step back into the crowd, heart strangely still now. Not loud, not triumphant, just full. The rest of the day feels like exhale. The village doesn't celebrate loudly. There are no trophies, just shared glances, knowing nods, soft claps. A woman you haven't spoken to all week squeezes your hand. The little boy who beaded "I'm the fastest runner" sprints across the field, and trips then stands up and laughs so hard he makes the old men laugh too. The old woman, meanwhile, sits by the tree. You kneel beside her. "Did I do it right?" you ask, unsure why you even need to ask. She doesn't look at you, just says, "You didn't try to be seen, you let the beads speak." Pause. That's all we've ever needed. You sit with her as the sun climbs higher. She begins sorting a fresh batch of beadstony, irregular, glassy in the light. "These are the leftovers," she explains, "the ones no one picks." You watch her thread them into a long meandering loop, no pattern, no theme, just presence. "What's that one for?" you ask. She shrugs. "It's for no reason at all." You blink. "Can you do that?" She laughs. "Of course! Why should every piece have to prove something? Historians rarely record pieces like this. The ones without symbolism. The ones made just because the hands were restless, or because the sky was too quiet, or because someone liked the way blue sat next to yellow. But these are some of the most honest pieces of all. You ask if you can help. She nods. Together, you bead nothing. Just colour, just texture, just now. The others wander over. Some sit. Some begin threading too. No one speaks much. The beads click and whisper in the bowl. A girl hums softly. Someone braids a necklace and hands it to no one in particular. It's not for anyone. It just exists. By sunset, the table is full of bracelets, anklets, loops, tangled strips that say nothing yet feel like everything. You hold your wrist and feel your beads there, warm from your skin. Tomorrow, maybe you'll tell someone what they mean. Or maybe not. Maybe you'll just keep walking with your colours around your body, your quiet story stitched in glass, and the understanding that sometimes just wearing truth is enough. The morning brings the clatter of spoons in clay bowls and the lightest sound of distant drumming someone's practicing early, off-key, cheerful, with no real urgency. It's your favourite kind of music. You sit by the doorway of your hut, thread and beads in your lap, watching dust rise in slow puffs as people begin to move around you. The old woman hasn't called for the circle yet, and no one seems in a rush to begin. Maybe that's the point. Today feels like a bonus day. You return to a project you abandoned, a while ago a strip you started during your second week, back when your fingers still trembled, and you couldn't tell grief from flirtation in a pattern. The piece is half finished, a little crooked, mostly blue and white, with a single misplaced red bead you never had the heart to remove. You pick it up, turn it in your hand. You used to think it was a mistake. Now, you think it might be the most honest bead on the whole strip. So instead of fixing it, you lean into it. You add a black triangle, slightly off-center. Then green lines that don't quite match. Then yellow, not for brightness, but for stubborn memory. Each bead is like revisiting a version of yourself you'd forgotten. One that hesitated, questioned, tried too hard to be neat, and one that didn't yet know how much a single bead could say. The old woman appears beside you, without a sound, her eyes scanning your progress. "You kept it," she says. You nod. "I almost threw it away." She doesn't scold, just says, "We almost always throw away what becomes important later." Historians rarely mention failed beadwork. Museum displays show only the perfect, the symmetrical, the masterful. But the village keeps its broken pieces in a special basketa-woven bowl full of snapped strings, mismatched patterns, and strands too short to wear. It's called the Umpthwaloth Burden Bowl. "It's not where things go to die," the old woman once told you. "It's where they go to rest." You ask if yours belongs there. She tilts her head. "Does it feel finished?" You pause. "Yes, but only now. Then it belongs on you." So, you tie it around your ankle. The knot is clumsy. It scratches a little when you walk, but you leave it on anyway. Later that morning, a group of girls invites you to visit the ridge where the wildflowers bloom out of cracked soil and the wind seems to hum a little louder. It's a steep walk, but no one complains. The beads on your ankle jingle faintly with every step, whispering tiny truths into the dust. When you reach the top, the view is wide and clean, stretching past trees, past the river, past even the road you arrived on weeks ago. The village looks small from here, your hut barely a speck. The beading circle, a ripple in the grass, and yet it holds everything. One of the girls spreads out a cloth and pulls beads from her satchel. "This is the good place," she says. "You bead different up here." You all sit in a loose circle, knees touching, backs warm from sun. No formal teaching, no oversight, just laughter, thread, and the occasional mock argument over what red means this week. You make a piece with no meaning. Then another that holds a secret. Then another small, crooked, rushed, but you give it away without blinking. Fringe traditions sometimes talk about ridge pieces, beadwork made in solitude or in groups, far from home, often stitched during rites of passage. Some say the altitude gives clarity. Others say it's just the quiet that helps. You think it's the distance. From this high, your questions get smaller. You ask less about what does this mean, and more about who do I want to become while wearing it. On the way down, your beads slap gently against your skin with each step. You wonder who might hear them, who might understand. Back in the village, the old woman is tending a fire. She doesn't ask where you went. She doesn't need to. She just gestures to the stew pot. "Eat," she says. "You'll need your strength tomorrow." You raise an eyebrow. "For what?" But she only smiles. No explanation. Just like beadwork. Just like life. Later that night, by lantern light, you sketch patterns in the dirt outside your hut. Not for anything in particular. Just testing. Dreaming. Inventing. You try one with alternating white and purple triangles. You don't know what it means yet, but you feel like someday someone else might. You wake to movement. Not footsteps. Not sweeping. Not the casual clatter of daily life. This is purposeful. Rhythmic. Like preparation. The air smells of clay and morning bread, but underneath it is something sharper smoke, maybe, or ash. You follow it out to the circle, where the fire pit has been cleared and restacked. In its centre sits a low pot, covered with something heavy weighing down the lid. The old woman stands beside it, arms folded, wearing her beadwork. All of it. You blink. She looks taller, somehow. Her wrists are layered with bangles of green and black. Her neck carries a wide red collar stitched with jagged triangles and sunburst patterns. Her ankles glitter with beads that must have taken months to make. The strip you helped mend the smuggled, an eye's tied into her waistband. "You're leaving soon," she says. It's not a question. You nod. "Then today," she says, "we burn the pieces we don't want to take with us." You freeze. She explains. Not everything is meant to be kept. Some beadwork is for a moment, for one feeling, for one truth that's no longer needed. Some patterns carry weight you shouldn't bring forward, so you gather the broken ones, the failed starts, the bracelet that made you cry the night you missed home, the early strips where your hands were still learning and your heart was still guarded, the one that said "I'm not ready," stitched before you even realized it was true. You add them to the basket beside the fire. The girls do the same. The bowl fills. Some cry, some don't. Fringe ethnographers refer to this as ceremonial disposal, though they often misunderstand its purpose. It's not about shame. It's not even about loss. It's about closure. A ritual to mark change to, honor what was before choosing what's next. The old woman removes the lid from the pot. Inside, a slow, controlled flame, not roaring, not angry, just hot enough to melt thread and release colour into smoke. You step forward. You drop your beads in, one at a time. Blue, green, the two shiny purple you never figured out. The little girl, your first critic, your first champion, stands beside you. She's crying. Just a little. She holds up a twisted anklet and whispers, "This one lied about how I felt." You nod. Then let it go. She drops it in. The old woman chants something low, rhythmic. Not a spell, not a prayer, just a remembering. Beads snap. Glass darkens. Smoke curls upward, carrying meanings no longer needed. When it's over, no one claps, no one cheers. You just sit together in the silence, watching the embers fade, a little lighter than before. That afternoon, you walk the village slowly, taking in details like you're etching them in your mind. The way the fig tree leans, the stone path worn down by generations of bare feet, the dog who never listens, the goat who always does, and the bracelets. Still there, hanging from doorknobs, branches, ankles and arms. Bits of colour speaking without sound. Worn pieces from girls you've taught, from women who've taught you. You realise suddenly that this language will outlast you, that the beads will go on speaking long after you've walked away. You return to your hut at sunset. Your hands are empty, but your pouch is full of beads you haven't used yet. They rattle softly when you walk. The old woman meets you outside. She doesn't ask how you feel. She just ties a final piece around your neck, a narrow strip of green and white with one red diamond in the centre. You start to ask, but she shakes her head. It says what you won't, she murmurs. You touch it gently, and you know she's right. That night, as crickets sing outside and the fire pops low and lazy, you begin to bead again, not for grief, not for love, not for memory, but for departure, a band to wear when you leave, stitched not in farewell, but in quiet defiance of silence. A final piece, and perhaps a beginning. The morning of your departure begins long before you're ready. You wake before dawn, blanket still tangled around your legs, heart already knocking at your ribs. The sky outside your window is that deep navy blue that only appears right before the sun decides to stretch. You sit up slowly, blinking away sleep, and listen. Nothing. No sweeping, no chatter, no bead clicking. Just stillness. You half expect the village to be waiting for you outside, with a farewell circle, songs, maybe a speech from the old woman. But when you step into the early light, barefoot, holding your small satchel and pouch of unfinished beads, no one is there. Instead, something better. A trail, little beads bright, glinting like morning dew lined up in a crooked path that winds through the village. You recognize the first ones, red and white, from the piece you gave away to the shy girl. The next, a green diamond, cracked slightly but unmistakable, from the ankle bracelet that once told a lie. Then yellow, blue, black, orange, all scattered intentionally. You follow. No one walks beside you, but the village is watching. Eyes peek from behind curtains. A little boy salutes you with a goat horn. One woman nods once, her eyes wet but proud. The trail leads past the fig tree, now wearing a necklace you helped fix, past the river, where a single red bead sits beside the path your lost one, perhaps, returned to see you off, and finally to the edge of the village, where the road begins again, where your footprints will be fresh, where the learning ends and the remembering begins. You pause there, alone. The wind nudges your braid. Your pouch of beads taps softly against your hip. The necklace around your neck, the final one, sits like a second heartbeat. The old woman does not appear, but she doesn't need to, because you feel her in your shoulders, straightened now with quiet knowledge, in your hands, tougher and gentler all at once. In your silence, where a whole language now lives, you kneel one last time and leave a bead at the road's edge, a single translucent one. Truth, not for you this time, for whoever comes next. And then you walk, not away, forward. The beads jingle softly, not saying goodbye, but repeating, "You were here, you were here, you were here." The road stretches ahead, like a long, unspoken sentence. It's not paved, not easy. The dust kicks at your heels, and the sun soon climbs high enough to remind you there's no tree cover for a while. But the beads on your wrist make a small, steady sound, with every step a sound you've come to recognize as comfort. You don't rush. There's no reason to. What would you rush toward? Instead, you think, not about leaving, but about what you're carrying. You pause once to sit under a flat-topped thorn tree, sipping from your water flask and running your fingers over your bead pouch. It feels heavier than before, even though you brought less than you arrived with. You open it and pour the beads into your hand. They're mismatched, no theme, some chipped, some new, Some unfamiliar like they snuck in while you weren't looking. And yet they hum together, like a family of colours that chose each other. You pick up a red one and think of your first bracelet, the one that didn't know if it was anger or love. A blue bead, pale as river mist, reminds you of a mourning belt you'll never forget. A green one flashes in the light, and you think not of beginnings, but of stubbornness, growth that happened because it had to, not because it wanted to. And then you find a bead you don't remember at all, clear, cloudy in the centre. Maybe one of the girls slipped it in. You decide to keep it close. Fringe scholars sometimes note that people carry travel beads when moving between places. Not jewellery, not for display just, a few beads tied into cloth or tucked into a pocket like a quiet compass. Not to guide them home, but to remind them what was home. You tie 3 onto your bag's strap. It feels ceremonial, but also casual, like lighting a candle before sleep, not necessary, but comforting. Later in the afternoon, you arrive at a small roadside hut selling fruit and cloth. The woman behind the table eyes your beads. She doesn't ask where you came from, she just says, "You make?" You nod. She offers you a mango in exchange for one of your wristbands. You hesitate. It's the band you made on the ridge, the one with no clear meaning. But that's exactly why it feels right to give. You untie it gently and hand it to her. She grins. "I will wear it when I want to confuse my sister." Fair enough. You eat the mango sitting on a rock, juice running down your wrist where the band used to be. It feels strange, being lighter there, but also freeing. You think back to the old woman's words. You don't need to keep everything you make. And then you laugh out loud, startling a nearby bird, because of course she's still in your head. Probably always will be. As the sun sinks lower, you make camp near a bend in the road. No fire tonight, just a blanket, a cool breeze, and the sound of insects trying out new songs. You pull out your needle and thread. Even now, even after everything, your hands still itch to make something. You don't think, you just bead. It's messy, uneven. You drop the needle once, nearly lose 2 beads in the grass, and stitch half the row backward. But it's real. It's now. You fall asleep with it half finished, still in your lap, your fingers resting in the bowl of colours. And as you drift off, the breeze lifts your pouch slightly, making the beads inside rustle like leaves, like voices, like a story still being told. The next few days stretch out like thread on the table, unspooling slowly, purposefully, without any rush to reach the end. You pass small farms, rusting signposts, the occasional traveller walking the other way with a nod, and nothing more. You eat bread that's a little too dry, fruit that's just sweet enough, sleep under trees, wake up with dust in your hair and birds arguing over your presence. But the beads stay constant. Each morning you reach into your pouch and pick 3. 1 for the day behind you, 1 for the day ahead, 1 for the thing you haven't figured out yet. You string them together on the same bandone row per day and wear it on your ankle like a silent calendar. By now, the strip has started to curve, pulling slightly with the weight of days. It's not beautiful, but it's honest. One night, you stay in a roadside village. You trade stories for a place to sleep and some soft rice with lentils. The woman hosting you eyes your beads, but doesn't ask. She just points to her shelf, where 2 small boxes sit. One is filled with buttons. The other beads? You grin. You make? She shrugs. Sometimes. She pulls out a thin green and yellow band, old, almost faded to invisibility. "My grandmother made it," she says, never said what it meant. You look closely. The pattern is familiar. Very familiar. It matches a strip the old woman, in the bead village, once showed you a line of longing and quiet grief stitched after her sister's wedding. You tell her that. She stares, then touches the cloth with new softness. She never said anything about her sister. Sometimes they don't. She smiles and tucks the band back into its box. Thank you for that. End prayer. Later, in the quiet, you think about how many stories are hiding in drawers, in attics, in handbags, and coat lining stories whispered in thread, waiting for someone with the language to hear them again. Fringe researchers sometimes talk about ancestral decoding, the idea that patterns in beadwork are not just symbols, but keys passed forward through generations, waiting for someone to remember how to use them. Not in a magical sense, just in a human one. You wonder how many people in the world are unknowingly walking around with entire conversations dangling from their necks. The next day, as you prepare to leave, the woman presses a bead into your hand. It's plain dull orange, chipped, not especially special. This was in my grandmother's basket, she says. I don't know what it means. You close your hand around it. Then I'll find out. You don't know how or when, but you mean it. You stitch it onto your calendar strip that night. The day you received a mystery, by the end of the week, you're near the coast. You can smell salt on the wind, even before you see the ocean. You stop walking for a moment, hand resting on your bead pouch. You've come far, but it doesn't feel like an ending. More like a widening, a deepening, like the shore that curves just beyond your line of sight. You start a new strip that night. The first bead is the orange one. The second is blue. The third is purple, because you still haven't decided what it means. The sound of the sea reaches you before the sight. It isn't the crashing, kind-no, cinematic waves, just a soft, rolling hush that pulls at your chest, like a memory you never made. The scent of brine and sun-warmed kelp drifts on the wind, and when you finally crest the dune, the water opens before you wide, glittering, endless. You sit for a long time, sandals off, ankles buried in sand, beads catching the sunlight like tiny mirrors. You've never beaded by the sea before. You reach into your pouch and let the beads spill into your lap. Some are chipped, some perfect. Some feel strangely heavy for their size. You don't plan a pattern. You don't try to send a message. You just begin. One stitch, one thread, one moment at a time. A child walks past and stops to watch you. No questions. Just wide eyes and a hand half raised, as if to ask, "May I?" You nod. He sits beside you, carefully picks 3 beads, and strings them together without speaking. One green, one clear, one black. "What does it mean?" you whisper. He shrugs. Maybe it's a snake, or maybe a tree. Both are excellent answers. Historians rarely write about random seaside beadwork. It doesn't fit into tidy ethnographic categories, but maybe it doesn't have to. Maybe some beadwork isn't for remembering or grieving or declaring. Maybe some beadwork is just for being there. You give the boy a spare thread and let him keep his peace. He runs off down the shore, bracelet bouncing against his palm like a kite without string. You stay. You stitch one more strip, slower now. You use the orange bead from the woman's grandmother, again this time surrounded by green, then blue, then purple, still unresolved. A pattern emerges by accident. 3 repeating triangles. Then, without thinking, you place a yellow bead at the center of each. You don't know why, but it feels light. Fringe bead historians sometimes say that patterns arrive through repetition. That meaning grows the way vines doby, trying and twisting and leaning toward the sun. You've come to believe that's true. You wear the strip around your wrist, loose and fluttering, and walk into the edge of the waves. The salt stings your skin a little, and you wonder whether it will tarnish the beads, but you don't care. Let them wear down. Let the sea take some of their polish. Truth doesn't always need to shine. That evening, you rent a cot from an old couple who don't speak much. Their walls are covered in tapestries, not beaded, but stitched with patterns just as cryptic. You ask about one in the hall-wared spirals against a deep blue sky. The woman smiles. "It's about the wind," she says. "He used to be my husband, now he just visits when he wants." You laugh. She doesn't. Later, as you lie in bed, the window cracked open to the sound of the sea, you take out the final thread of the day. It's thin, nearly invisible, a leftover from a discarded coil. You thread it anyway, then choose one Be-Adjust one, and stitch it into the hem of your sleeve. You won't tell anyone it's there. Not because it's a secret, but because you want to remember something that only you know. That silence can speak. That stitching is listening. That a single bead, held close, can carry 1,000 miles of story. And then, finally, you sleep.